to the Stoke Podcast. My name's Quinn. Today I have Chase Edwards, an ultra marathon cyclist. Chase has an amazing story. I can't wait to hear it. She is the Ultra Endurance Series 2018 and 19 winner.
19.
19.
Mm-hmm.
19 winner. In 2020, she had a medical malpractice, which we'll dive into, and then in 2021 she rebounded and she won the AZT 800. So thank you, Chase, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So just so listeners know, like, what kind of got you into cycling in the first place?
Yeah, so I was actually a rock climber in my 20s and climbing guide, and when I went back to grad school, I found myself a little bit too stressed to be coordinating climbing partners all the time. And I'm the kind of person that really likes to have an outdoor activity because I find just a lot of, it's just a great way to balance the other areas of my life. And so Flagstaff, Arizona is a really amazing bike area with terrain and community. And so I got on a bike for the first time, and I dragged my feet because I didn't want to pick up another sport. But when I did, I didn't regret it and started putting in huge miles around Flagstaff. And soon loved it so much that I started racing elite and for the construction zone team out of Arizona.
Nice. And so you started, like, because climbing in Flagstaff, if anyone doesn't know, is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's probably one of the best in the country, of just unreal rock to be touching with your bare fingertips.
True.
And then, so what got you into, like, what year was it? Like, how many years was it after rock climbing you found cycling?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say almost a decade, because
Nice.
I started climbing in college and in my 20s, so it wasn't until the end of my 20s that I picked up mountain biking and just fell madly in love with it. And it was a great way to get to know other parts of Arizona as well.
Cool. And did you start your cycling more of just an immense hobby, like, and you just loved it? Or did you have any, did you think you were going to race?
Yeah, I didn't. And I was actually really against racing, which is why I rock climbed, because I spent my entire youth cross-country running and Nordic skiing with my dad as my coach. And I did my first junior Olympic running race when I was only 10 years old. So it consumed my childhood. And so I was really actually against racing. But I think because I chose mountain biking on my own and wasn't pushed into it by another person, and just it suited me, and I like being able to go big and see a lot of areas while I'm riding, and so it stuck, and I stuck with it. So
Sweet. Do you recall, like, growing up, it was almost like Nordic skiing and racing in a way where you were forced into it, and that's always like, you just never want to do something.
And when it's your dad's the coach, it just was my whole life. And I think I needed a break from competition, but the women's community at bike races, because we are still the minority, is really a tight fit, especially in the National Ultra Endurance Series. A lot of encouragement with each other. And so I think I was really drawn to that too. And almost was like, saw a need for more women in the sport and latched onto that.
There's still, I mean, there's such a need for more women joining the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll fast forward, when you started racing, how shortly was it until you realized, okay, I need to actually race elite instead of expert or whatever racing you were doing? Like, when did you know, okay, actually I'm good at this. This is something that I kind of want to pursue more. Because when you start riding, it's a pursuit, just as anything is. I mean, when you get on a bike, you're like, oh, how far can I go? But you know, when you don't know how other people perform compared to yourself, and then you finally do really well. How was that transition of knowing, okay, now I'm an elite cyclist?
Yeah, so I tried to balance climbing with my new love of cycling for the first couple of years. And actually, at age 29, my birthday party was rock climbing in Indian Creek. And then by the next year, I have an ex-partner that says that I stuck to mountain biking like a fly on shit, and that was kind of what it was. I just loved it so much that I started canceling climbing trips to put in big miles, and I did a lot of 12 and 24-hour races, and then did my first 100-mile race in Big Bear and won that, and the payout was $1,000. I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty rad to stand on the podium with a big $1,000 check. I guess it was after that I was like, well, I think I could make like a little bit of a side project, or if not side career, out of this. And I loved 100-mile races for a really long time. I like being able to see a lot of the area that I'm riding in. And hundreds are hard because you push yourself like you're racing cross country, but then it just keeps going. And so, yeah, so that was sort of how I started out. So it was maybe a couple years juggling it with climbing, and then by 30, I was pretty stoked on the women's scene. And also, there's a lot of research out there that your endurance kind of picks up in your 30s, so it was good timing for that.
Sweet. And so, 30 years old, you win Big Bear, which is a huge race.
Mm-hmm.
$1,000?
Yeah.
It's insane. To go to like race a bike and be like, oh my god, we're going shopping. No, seriously, like, that's insane. So the 100 miles are an amazing course. Anywhere you go, it is a way to see so much of the trail. And I'm just like you, where it's 100-mile racing isn't a lollygag.
Yes.
Yeah, you're doing an XC race, but monitoring your RPMs. You know, like you're going pretty hard for 100 miles, so it is painful, like really painful. But so when did you get into ultras?
So then I got into bike packing shortly after and just wanted to do it all. I had been following the blog of Esther O'Reilly, who has won Tour Divide and the Colorado Trail Race, and she actually still has one of the Colorado Trail Race records, I think. And I just loved the idea of sleeping in the dirt for a couple hours and racing as hard as you can on a long trail. Just really seemed like my style. And so I did a few bikepacking trips every year as sort of while training for the 100-milers, and did a couple of ultra endurance bikepacking races, but smaller ones of the more the like 200-300 variety. And then in 2021, as I was coming back from the medical malpractice incident that was mentioned earlier, I dove in sort of full on for the Arizona Trail Race, which is 800 miles from the Mexico border to the Utah border, and you cross the Grand Canyon with your bike on your back. And that's the longest that I've done so far, and it was an incredible experience. And now that's where I'm at. I'm getting ready for training for the Stagecoach 400, which is in March, so that'll be my next big bikepacking race.
Who puts that on?
A gal named Meg Noble runs it, and it's out of Wild, California.
Okay, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really cool way of like kind of dipping your toes in the water, is still training for 100s by these ultra races. And was it an easy transition? Like, I know you wanted to like ride your bike so far, but what was challenging about the transition of I can bring 2 water bottles and a handful of nuts on a 100-mile race, but with an ultra, anything over 100, you really have to like plan your water, plan your food, plan what you're going to be taking with you. So how was that transition?
It takes so much more preparation, especially because it's self-supported. And so you can't have someone out there handing you out water bottles or feed zones like that. And so you really do, especially for the Arizona Trail, need to know where your next water is going to be, and usually carrying around 4 to 5 liters between water sources. So a ton more prep, but then also there's a lot more sort of in the moment planning and strategy, or going on in the moment while you're racing, which I really find engaging too, because you can't memorize the whole like 800 miles of the Arizona Trail, for example. So you also go in knowing that you're going to be spending some time thinking that, I mean, you have a lot of time to think, but thinking about when your next resupply is and how many calories to get there. And then taking care of your bike for 800 miles is also huge. So there's no feed zones and no places for mechanics to meet you on the trail. So you got to be able to handle all that yourself as well. So there is a big difference. But I did spend my early 20s climbing and mountaineering guiding, and I think that gave me a little bit of an edge because a lot of that crosses over just the wilderness preparation aspect and feeling comfortable out there.
And knowing what to put into a backpack is huge. If you've never done a backpacking trip, how would you, for me, I've done a few backpacking trips, so I would kind of know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you never have done a backpacking trip, there's a lot of equipment out there too that's super lightweight and things that are accessible that you put on your bike.
Totally, and it's a really fine balance between how little you can carry and still stay safe and relatively comfortable with on a bike. So yeah,
because you forget some for the AZT 800. It's not like forgetting your wallet at home. It's like I forgot one water bottle. No. So I couldn't even imagine how much planning, preparation, and also wrapping your mind around an 800-mile race. What was that like? I mean, how do you even begin to prep mentally for something like that?
Yeah, so it was really interesting for me. So I was really into race strategy and applying it to life, and then also in races. And this goes for 100-mile races and then also the big bikepacking ultras. And so things like chunking down the amount of miles that you have in your head so that you're not from the start, for instance, going, oh my God, 800 miles. Instead, you're bringing it into like little manageable chunks. And I do that in my work life and my just daily life too. And then also thinking a lot about what you can control and what you can't control, and keeping your mind on what you can control, because things in the 100-mile races, I mean, that's still a long time to keep your body and your bike going at a quick pace. And so I use it for that as well.
Yeah. And it's much easier for that 10 miles to the gas station than the 785 miles to the finish line. So just a lot about chunking things down, kind of planning, this is what I can control and this is what I can't control. And when things get hard, which I'm sure they did, what was kind of your mantra? Like, how did you kind of keep moving forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like to tell myself that I'm here now, and so that's sort of the way of being like, okay, so control what you can in the moment now. And then honestly, on the AZT, I found laughing to be really valuable, because after sleeping for a couple hours in the dirt, you wake up super sore, like super swollen feet, and it feels like even just like crawling out of your bivy sack is not possible. And so I would often drink some water or something with a little caffeine in it, and just like think of something funny and start laughing until I could get out of the bivy sack.
And then you're good.
And then I was good. And that worked really well. And I think sort of on a smaller scale, there's a lot of research on just smiling to help you kind of get back into the moment and feel positive and how good smiling is for you. And I think I needed to kind of one up that a little bit on the AZT, because it was so rugged, and so laughing is what I did.
Hikers are walking by. Who's this person laughing
Laughing at herself.
That's a really cool technique to use, and something that I really have never thought about. Smiling, on the other hand, I have used. When you're just like, what the fuck am I doing? You just smile. You're like, all right, I'm a little bit better, but laughing's a whole other level. And my biggest thing to wrap my head around, if I were to ever do an ultra, is like the darkness is a hard thing to face for me. I love riding at night with my light, and I'm out at the trails right near my neighborhood. But knowing how far away I am from anything and anyone, and especially at night too, when there's nobody like everyone's not going on a nice night hike, you know, so you know that you're just kind of alone out there. Are you comfortable with the night riding part, like the aspect of it?
Yeah, I am. And I also crack myself up because I've been saying since I moved to Arizona in my early 20s that I wanted one of those moments with a mountain lion where you like make eye contact and it's like super surreal. And then as soon as night hits when I'm racing at Ultra, I'm like, it's actually okay if that doesn't happen right now. Mountain lions, it's okay. But I did see one on a big training ride this summer. And so I did get my like moment of eye contact with a mountain lion at dusk. And that was pretty cool and pretty non-threatening feeling, but still, yeah, I do laugh when when I'm really tired in the middle of an ultra and not actually wanting to encounter that mountain lion.
Yeah, no way. That's the one thing I think about. Where did you see this mountain lion?
It was around Stoneman Lake Road. Yeah,
No.
nearby.
Oh man, I shouldn't even have asked.
Yeah.
Because there's a good loop out there that I have on my GPS that I know exists, and I just haven't done it yet. But it goes right by Stoneman Lake, so I don't know if I'll be doing that one. Mountain lions are for sure. I knew I could go fist for fist with one for a little bit. Like I think I could throw in a good fight, but that's the one thing I know will just. It's a monster out there. You have to like literally worry about getting attacked by a monster while you're having a fun time on the trail. Yeah, so the nighttime is okay if you don't make eye contact with a mountain lion. But other than that, it's like for you, it's not like scary or the unknown. Really, that's my thing.
As long as I can stay awake, I usually get a little bit of a second wind. I think it's something to do with the temperature dropping, and it feels a little bit exciting, and also I think a little. I mean, I probably do get a little nervous at night, but it feels like a second wind. You can just kind of channel it that way.
Yeah. Just all right. Here we go. Just rode all day. Now I'm gonna ride all night.
Yep.
Cool. Because the reason I asked, the 2 nights ago, I helped coordinate the Yavapai Hustle race that's out here by Blowout.
Oh, cool.
But I was doing trail markings, and the sun went down, and I shortly stopped marking trails because it was different because you have to get off your bike, and I didn't have a headlamp, and I'm banging the course markings in. The whole time I'm like, oh, I'm so vulnerable. I'm gonna die. I gotta give my fiance a call. I'm done. So I think with the ultras, for me, it's gonna be the night riding for sure. Well, sweet. And then I want to dive into the Arizona Trail because this was a very significant race for you, not in your career, but I feel as if it was important to you just for yourself. Mm-hmm. It wasn't for anyone else. This was your race. And can you go into like why the Arizona Trail race was super significant for you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'll backtrack to 2019, which was the height of my racing career of hundreds and racing professionally. And I just won the Ultra Endurance Series. And I had been promoted at work. I was a lecturer at NAU to senior lecturer. So it was a really good year. I had a lot to celebrate. And unfortunately, at the end of 2019, there was also a lot to juggle, racing your bike at that level along with holding a career. I made a mistake of walking into a nurse practitioner's office for some help with anxiety. And he diagnosed me with ADHD and really pushed the diagnosis on me. And I know now he's grown his practice and he specializes in ADHD in a college town where I'm sure he is just making tons of money off of college students and ADHD medication, and faculty too, because that's what I was. Anyway, I had a really horrible reaction to Adderall almost from the beginning. But again, because it was his specialty, he was convinced that the new symptoms I was feeling was just my ADHD somehow getting out of hand or out of control. So he kept increasing my medication over the course of the year. And several months later, I was in something called adderall-induced psychosis, which started with mania, and then I forgot my life, and it was like I would wake up every morning not knowing what was going on and make up stories in my head about my life. And I actually wrote them all down because I'm a writer. Writing is what I used to teach at NAU. And so for 4 months, I sat alone at my house with my dog, taking my prescribed dose of ADHD medication, and pushing people in my life away from me because I didn't recognize them or know who they were. And my mind was making up different stories about them. And then I was finally hospitalized, and they actually had to drug me to bring me down from this. And so again, it's like the drug that was making me sick, I was continuing to take while I was sick for 4 months. So like what that did to my brain is scary to think about. And so after I actually went back to Michigan for a little bit to where I grew up. And then when I came back to Flagstaff, I had humiliated myself on my professional athlete Instagram account, and most of the community knew something had happened to me, but didn't know the details. And I suddenly found myself isolated without the community and friends and support that I was used to having. And so it was really hard to get back on my feet and also back on my bike. But I'd lost everything except my house and my bikes. And so riding my bike seemed like what I should do. And so I went to United Bicycle Institute to get my bike mechanics certification over the summer. And it was there that I called my mom actually in tears and said, I have to do something that involves racing again if I'm going to be okay. Like I don't think I can love working on bikes if I don't also find something fulfilling with racing again. And so there was 2 months before the Arizona Trail Race, which back in my professional days, it would have taken a whole year to plan for a race like that. But she said she had me and that her wine bar would sponsor me while I trained for the next 2 months. So after getting my bike mechanics certification, I came back to Flagstaff and just started putting in huge miles. And every time that I found myself getting weighed down by the events of, this is 2020 was when the medical malpractice and I know that I suffered from adderall psychosis happened. I would just visualize myself on the AZT and put in huge miles and visualize myself on the AZT and force myself to smile sometimes. Gradually became more comfortable going into the bike shop again that I had been going to for 10 years and being able to say hi and smile and get caught up on life with people. And so then I rode from my house in Flagstaff down to the start of the race. And at the start of the race, it was like I was back in community again. And that felt really good. Alexander Houchin, who's a big name in ultra-endurance cycling, gave me a big hug. So did the race organizer. And it felt just at peace with all of it again. And it was a great way to start that race. And I should also mention that the reason I was drawn to the AZT as sort of my comeback race is because it is entirely self-supported. And so again, I felt as though I had lost a lot of friends and community because of this incident. And so I needed something where I could just support myself. Like I didn't need to call on friends and people to give me hand ups at feed zones and things like that, like I would do with the hundreds. And so that piece was really important to me as well.
I couldn't even fathom what that experience must have felt like, because I studied psychology, and the brain is the number one chemical maker, and that we know of. It's we're continuously making chemicals, but your conscious awareness is reality. So I couldn't even imagine how you would feel when your reality is not everyone else's. You know, someone said that the only reason we call it reality is we're all having the same hallucination. But someone who's on psilocybin is, having another experience and a whole nother reality, and same with LSD or whatever. So to you, it is now a shifted reality. And like, I commend you for getting out of that in such a impactful and powerful way, to really do something for yourself that was completely unsupported. You wanted to support yourself and do this for you. Chase, reading your story was like so touching, like heartbreaking and touching and inspirational. But I kind of want to go back to that medical malpractice because, you really should have been kind of informed on Adderall and the effects of it and ADHD, especially from a doctor. And it's always scary if you're talking to someone in a white coat.
Mm-hmm.
There's a trust that, you wouldn't have trust in others just because of the stigma that they're a doctor.
Yeah.
And so was it shortly after this malpractice you knew that I now feel more anxiety after taking Adderall? Or, what was that first initial week or two when you were like, I don't think something's right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting question for me because the anxiety that I felt coming back to my community after recovering from Adderall psychoses was so, that was real anxiety and being nervous. And whatever I was feeling when I walked in there to manage a little bit of anxiety back at the end of 2019 just felt like a joke. Like really? Just give me that dose of anxiety back and I got that under wraps at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was having to manage that. And then I guess it's interesting to me thinking about when the misdiagnosis and Adderall was prescribed, because I also bike commute everywhere. And so I walked into that clinician's office. He was only a nurse practitioner, actually, not a full-on doctor, with my bike helmet in my hand and my messenger bag. And I think that I was stereotyped. It didn't matter that I said, hey, I'm a professional athlete, while also juggling a career at Northern Arizona University. He didn't hear any of that. I think he just saw helmet hair.
Yeah.
And made some assumptions.
Oh, this is just a normal Flagstaff person,
Yeah, they all have ADHD.
Yeah, they all
do.
Here you go.
Yeah.
So, just right from the get-go, you walked in, and it wasn't an actual doctor. It was just a nurse practitioner.
Yeah.
And prescribed you a normal amount of Adderall for ADHD.
And then just kept increasing it. That was the horrible part.
Did they do any psychological tests on ADHD? They ask you questions.
Yeah, he asked me a few questions, again, raising professionally and balancing a career is a lot. So sometimes I can be a little scattered, and maybe I do have a little ADHD, but not enough to warrant the FDA's highest recommended dose, which is what he had me on at the end, which for a relatively small woman is just too much. I mean, it's the amount that you would give a linebacker.
Totally.
So.
Totally. And Adderall would disrupt your eating schedule, the way you hydrate yourself, and then there's so much more that goes into just the drug in general that affects multiple different aspects of your life, which then affects the mind again, and so it's this positive feedback loop that really doesn't help anything. And how long was this prescribed to you? And did you let the nurse practitioner know that I'm not feeling right?
Yeah, it's actually, so it was almost a full year of being prescribed it, except that he would prescribe it because it's really not regulated well in Arizona, so that more than I ever needed a month. So when I stopped going to those appointments when I was in psychoses, I had enough to just keep taking it. So I stopped showing up for my appointments with him because it didn't matter because he'd already prescribed me enough to keep taking it. And I had a fill-in provider. It was all over Zoom because of the pandemic, who I am directly quoted in her notes of saying, I don't think my ADHD is as bad as I think it is. I think I need a lower dose of Adderall, because my friends were starting to become concerned. And so told me I really needed to address it with a provider. And she increased the dose based on the original nurse practitioner's recommendation anyway, and just said, well, you'll have it if you need it. And this is all documented in the notes, and it doesn't matter. And I've learned since that a handful of lawsuits were won against Adderall, or the company that makes Adderall, and prescribers over the last few years. And so now Adderall has like a big watch. The maker of Adderall whose name I forget, has a big like watchdog group that they pump a ton of money into, and so attorneys won't take Adderall cases at all anymore because they've figured out how to, I don't know, how to win them, even though all of the science on suffering from a significant adverse reaction from Adderall is there. I mean, it's a real threat to some people, the drug needs to be taken much more seriously. And I really do think I've had a lot of people reach out to me with similar experiences and some really sad ones about their loved ones or parents of children who've committed suicide, saying Adderall was the last thing that they were prescribed, and just knowing that led to a tragedy such as suicide. Like I think it's the next opioid pandemic is what I'm trying to say. I think we're going to start seeing it monitored a lot more, I hope, soon.
It should be, totally, because it sounds like it's easier when marijuana was illegal to get a medical card.
Yeah.
You know, and it was pretty easy to get a medical card, right? Because whoever prescribed it is getting money for that medical card. But it's treated as more of a budget than a medicine, which that's a problem when literally we're prescribing these medications for a paycheck. It's not healthy at all, especially when you're endangering lives and minds, you know. Through that, you've been reached out by people who've had that same kind of, not same experience, but that same adverse effect. And it's cool though that you are an outlet to tell, you told your story, and it was a really cool story. So you'll probably get more and more people coming to you, like myself, wanting to hear your story so that more people can, you know, hear this story. But what, it's like, it's hard to even, it's just hard to even put my own feet in your shoes regarding that situation. And how long did it last?
So it was, 5 months total that I was in what's called psychosis. And then it took me several months to rebound. I mean, the drugs that they put me on also did some damage to my brain chemistry. Like it stifled my dopamine and things like that. And so it took me several months to really feel like myself again. I mean, I just felt like a slow-moving, sad version of myself for a lot of 2021, actually, until the Arizona Trail race. And then I've always been a proponent of when in a tough spot or a rough spot, going outside and feeling small in a really big place. And so that was another reason that I chose the Arizona Trail race, is I just wanted that time in the backcountry and in nature to, really feel like myself again, but also to feel small, like there's something out there, even if you just say nature, that was bigger than me, more powerful than me, and more powerful than the problems that I was feeling.
Absolutely. And after that experience, now moving on, you start the Arizona Trail race, and you're with a community again, and you're starting to feel more and more like yourself. I want to hear now, like, everything that you experience on there. Probably not everything, because we'll be here for days, I'm sure. But what was the three most highest points that you had on the Arizona Trail race? Yeah,
so the race is pretty fun because there's a 300-mile race too, and so in 2021 they started in different spots, but eventually I caught up to the 300-milers and raced with them until they made it to the Picket Post Trailhead. And I would say that first 300 miles was definitely a highlight because I was riding back and forth with a really awesome woman whose husband owns Z-Packs out of Denver. Her name's Kristen, and we were back and forth and riding together, and that was really fun. And it felt like community for those first 300 miles. And then most of the people stopped racing at 300 miles, and then that was when the sort of like long, lonesome miles start. But I was also looking forward to those too, again, because of that feeling of awe and wanting to feel small in a big place and just spend some time going hard on my own. And so the first 300 miles were a highlight. There was one moment where the terrain is, Arizona Trail is it's incredible and so rugged and pretty technical. And I did a huge nosedive. My toes were like red and sticking out of my socks. It was so bad, and like blisters. And I had then just 2 more days of riding, less than 2 more days of riding after that. And my feet were, they looked like they belonged to an elephant. I couldn't get them in and out of my shoes, really.
Did you you brought hiking shoes?
Nope, I just wore my cleats.
You wore your cleats for 26 miles?
That was beta from Kurt Ruffschneider, who has the men's record from a few years ago. And he said, yeah, you're so tired, you don't want to like deal with, just don't deal. And so it was all right, you know?
Sweet.
But,
wow. And then how far was it from the North Rim home? Well, not home, the flag, but...
I think it's like 75 miles to the finish from the North Rim. So it went a lot slower than I was expecting, but that... towards the end, there are a few dirt roads and some actually really mellow flow single track coming into the campground that goes on forever, and I kept falling asleep, which I had never done before in an ultra, but like falling asleep while riding and like about to like crash and like have to wake up, and so I sang to myself to try and stay awake to the finish.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you didn't sleep through the Grand Canyon, or did you?
Didn't, because you have to get a permit if you're going to do that. So I slept. I had pushed all the way through and slept at the rim.
You have to get a permit at an ultra race to sleep in the Grand Canyon. Yeah. That's pretty sweet, though.
Yep.
So guys, whoever wants to do the AZT, get a permit if you want to sleep in the Grand Canyon. And 75 miles of sleep exhaustion to the finish line. And was that morning, night?
I finished. It was a full day of riding. And then I finished, I guess, in the middle of that next night. Pretty sure that's right. Yeah. Middle of that next night, 2 a.m. I think I rolled in onto the Utah border. Nice.
And then were there people there?
So my mom and my aunt and my dog met me, and then Kurt Ruffschneider met me too, which is pretty fun to be met by sort of one of the biggest legends in ultra endurance racing.
He is the man. But it was just like kind of really 3 people.
Yeah, that was it. Sitting around a campfire.
That's ultra though. That's so fun. Like 3 people that you wouldn't, 3 of the best people that you want to be at the finish line.
Yeah.
And there's no big pop-up finish line like you see at 100-mile races. just a campfire. Well, that's amazing. What were your emotions like when you were done?
I was really excited to see my dog, and really excited to be done, and really excited to do it again, because it was one of those things where I knew, it's always like this with the big ultra endurance races, like you learn so much while you're out there that you just know you can shave time off next time, and how much less I could bring, and just knowing the trail that much more. So it was, but in that moment, I didn't even care about setting the record. I was just glad to be done.
Glad to be done.
Get some sleep.
Yeah. And that's what I feel like it always is the case, is that once you're done with something, you go, I know exactly how I can be 1 day faster. How long did it take you to complete it?
10 days.
10 days.
Yeah.
800 miles. So that's almost 100 miles a day.
Yep.
100 miles alone will put you out for 2 days.
Yeah.
Let alone repetitive impact on the body like that. So the recovery must have been insane too. Mm-hmm. Was it just?
Yeah, I just laid on the couch for a couple of days with big swollen elephant feet. Yep.
Yeah, man. And so the Arizona Trail Race was complete, and how did that make you feel towards everything after the fact of the medical malpractice and going through psychosis, mm-hmm. and knowing that this was a race that I'm just doing for myself, I'm going to support myself, and this is just for Chase. Yeah. When you got done, now you don't have that, mm-hmm. right? You don't have that thing to look forward to. Like this isn't my race to get me out of it. Did you expect to feel the way you did after the race?
Yeah, that's a great question. To me, I felt so much stronger and capable, and that was another reason that I did it, is that I just needed to believe in myself again. Like I lost. Sometimes I say that I lost myself, but really what I lost while suffering from adderall-induced psychosis was, or recovering from it, was a belief in myself. And so, just feeling capable again, that I could, that I could keep riding such huge distances and stay positive and keep my head in the game. And I had a fair amount of mechanicals too, so to fix those when those arose, and also a couple of crashes, and you need to keep, when you're out there for that many days, keep things clean, when you do tear up in your knee, for example. So it's just that taking care of yourself then translates to feeling more capable. So I felt great. And I had a moment because the trail goes through Flagstaff, which I've called home for a really long time now, and a moment coming up from the desert back onto the Mogollon Rim where I was riding from frost-covered meadow to frost-covered meadow, but in what I call my backyard, which felt pretty incredible too. And so I just sort of felt like the AZT welcomed me back to the state and the part of the state I call home in a really cool way as well.
It's really cool, and I could hear it in your voice that you took care of yourself the whole time. No one else did, and I'm sure that was a really good feeling of now being done with the race. Of like, if I could take care of myself through the 800 miles, both mentally, going through cactus claws, everything, and still have a good attitude about it. When you're done, it's the same, translating it the same way. Now we're in the real world. It's just the same race. It's the same way to deal with adversities and challenges. Is if I can do it on a bike for 800 miles, I can do it today.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really cool. That's really cool. And so you said you're going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to do it this next year?
Yeah, so I actually was planning on doing it this year in 2022, and I was planning on doing the Colorado Trail Race as well. And I had a recurrence of symptoms right before the Colorado Trail Race, and that kept me from both of them. And I'm learning now to take even better care of myself, and I have a really great healthcare team behind me that understands. Again, 4 months of taking a drug that was hurting my brain. Hurt my brain. It injured it. It's like having a head injury. And so I really can't do things like go on a 100-mile bike ride and then sit in a hot tub and drink a couple of beers and then stay up all night long doing something else. I just can't do that anymore because it does trigger trigger